Irish fairy tales are now available at irishfairytales.com. We create beautiful keepsake kids' costumes and enchanting tales to spark little ones' imagination. Each book is sprinkled with cúpla so that parents and children can learn a couple of words in Irish together, and don't worry, they're written phonetically for those that need it, like me. These are gorgeously illustrated books and each have a message of bravery and compassion, and you can choose from either the mermaid version or the dragon version, or if you've two little ones you can get both and the stories mirror each other. And once you've read the story together, your little one can dress up in their beautiful, wipe clean tale that are designed to be safe and sensory friendly, and off they go on their adventures. irishfairytales.com. Hello, I'm Stef McSherry and this is the Mum Mind podcast, the show that gets you the info that you need as you need it. My guest today is no stranger to podcasts or radio or TV. It's Dr. David Coleman. You will know him as a child and adolescent clinical psychologist. If you're not following him on Instagram, I would really recommend it because he answers parents' questions directly. So you will get direct information. My 12-year-old's doing this, what do I do? And the information he gives out is really practical, really easy to understand. His new book is due out the 5th of March and it is called Fearless, the 10-step guide to helping kids take charge of anxiety. So it's real world examples and really practical strategies, and we cover loads of it in this podcast. So if you have an anxious little one or a teenager that kind of has these periods of anxiety, this is well worth a listen. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Dr. David Coleman. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Steph. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's raining, but you know, we seem to be used to that at this point.
Absolutely.
I was just having a look at your the PR blurb about your book, and I'm assuming it's come about because you are seeing in your practice more and more anxiety in younger children. Is that true?
Yes, I mean, certainly I think what's happened over the last number of years really is that it's almost like anxiety has become pathologized for a lot of children and teenagers in a way that it doesn't necessarily need to be. So, I mean, I certainly have teenagers coming into my clinical practice saying, I have anxiety, with the great, kind of definition that only teenagers can add to their statements, and that's based on their own self-diagnosis, much as if they had COVID or if they had, the flu. And when we pull it back, of course they do feel anxious in situations, but I'm not sure that they necessarily have an anxiety disorder. And so I think that's one of the things that has shifted and changed. There's been a lot of discourse in the media, about mental health, and while in the main that's kind of positive, one of the things that I think it definitely has done though is pathologize a lot of normal emotional experiences that children and teenagers have. And so that's really what the book is trying to access, is how do we help children who just feel anxious in situations? How do we help teenagers who just feel anxious? It does also, I suppose the book will help people to identify when that anxiety has gone past, kind of normal, typical anxiety that's more readily dealt with, and when you might need then to access a professional to help with a very specific kind of anxiety disorder.
So is it that we as parents should be realising there are situations that do make us all anxious, and that's quite normal?
100%. I often think of anxiety being a little bit like the anxiety system being a bit like an oven. And so life and circumstance will switch on the oven. So we don't get a choice about becoming anxious in situations. What we do then hopefully have a choice about is what temperature do we let that oven get up to, or what intensity do we allow the anxiety to rise to? And so again, that's, what I'm trying to help parents and others realize, is that there are things that they can do to support their children, or that their children can do directly to just keep the level of anxiety down at a more manageable level, where a child can still feel the fear but do the thing that they're nervous about. And that's how we all cope with anxiety, because it would be a really dangerous situation if we couldn't become anxious, because then we might put ourselves in the way of danger. We wouldn't have the signals that this is not a wise thing to be doing. And so I think a lot of children and teenagers now, though, are misreading those signals and seeing that something is more dangerous than it actually is. And so the natural response to something being dangerous is that we avoid it, which again can be wise. If you're standing on the edge of the cliff, it's wise to step back a little bit because that is actually dangerous.
Yeah.
But in other situations, going and talking to those, other boys and girls in a situation, or, going down and joining the soccer club, if that's the thing that they're feeling really anxious about, that's an okay thing to do, and that they will be okay out the other side. And that's the bit I think that, lots of parents as well, as soon as their child starts to feel anxious, they also assume that their child has some lifelong disorder, and don't feel, enabled or empowered to actually just deal with it.
And I'm assuming there's a fine line, again, as a parent, kind of how much do you not push, but encourage, I guess, to them to push past that? And then when do you know to kind of back off?
Yeah. So there's a really straightforward way that you can find that fine line, which
Okay.
is to create with your child some kind of anxiety measurement system. So it's called a subjective unit of distress scale, if we're to use the psychological jargon. But essentially, it's like a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 might be totally chill and calm, cuddled up in your PJs, listening to a story with your mom or dad. And 10 would be total panic, heart racing, feeling like you're about to die. And so a child can then, evaluate or judge their own level of anxiousness somewhere between 0 and 10. And typically, if they're feeling anxious at a level of 0 to 4, that's probably not going to get in the way at all. That's just the normal nerves that you might feel before a performance, or before you go and play the match, because you're excited for how the match is going to go and you want to play well. And then between 5 and 7 is the kind of anxiousness that you're probably regulating and working hard to, keep yourself in that positive mindset, reminding yourself you're going to be okay, that this is going to work out. And then if it's up at the level of 8, 9, or 10, that's probably going to be overwhelming should you continue without doing anything to regulate that anxiousness. And so that's the thing. If you're trying to encourage your child to do something and they're rating their fear of doing this thing between 8, 9, or 10, then you've got to put in other strategies. If you just send them in there, what's going to happen is they're going to end up what we call white knuckle riding it. So they're literally going to be clinging on, hanging on for dear life. They might get through it, but they won't learn anything about their ability to cope. They'll just simply have survived and probably felt overwhelmed in that process. And so it might actually be even detrimental, because it might turn them off doing the thing because it was such an uncomfortable experience. So if they're rating it somewhere between 8, 9, or 10, then we're going to have to do something with them, some kind of grounding exercises, breathing exercises, then start, helping them look at their mindset. How can they think differently about the situation? How can they access some of their coping strategies, things that they know might actually work out, and feel that it's maybe possible. If all that happens, then that might bring their anxious feeling down to, a 7, a 6. And then you can absolutely nudge them into doing the thing that they're afraid of. And that's the process actually by which we do gain the confidence then. So when we, to use the American expression, wasn't it a book that was written, feel the fear and do it anyway. Then we kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I can do it. It is manageable, and I'm able for this.
And are you gauging that scale on kind of symptoms, for want of a better word? Like, are you asking them how is their breathing or heart rate?
No.
No. Okay.
No, simply give me a number between 0 and 10.
Okay.
And they say, oh, it's a 9, it's a 9. And you don't counteract that. You don't say, well, you don't look like it's a 9,
Okay.
It wasn't a 9 last week, why is it a 9 this week?
Yeah.
So you go with their rating. And so what that does, that even that is empowering, because now they are in charge of, their experience. So you go, okay, if it's a 9, okay, well, that's pretty, whoa, that must feel awful. I'm guessing your heart's pounding now then if it's up at a 9. And they go, oh yeah, it is, Dad, it is. Yeah, it's awful now, And you go, okay, well, let's do something about that. Like, what do you think might help? That's a very uncomfortable feeling. Let's see if we can get that number down. You don't want to be
You're
feeling like that.
believing them no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, but well, it's their rating. How do we know how
Yeah.
anxious they feel? So they know. I mean, they're the only people who can truly judge it.
Yeah.
I mean, we will probably have picked up that they're anxious because of the things that they're saying. Maybe they're, actively trying to avoid going. They're sitting there telling you that their stomach hurts and they feel nauseous and they're going to throw up. If you make me go, I'm going to throw up. And they well might, because we
Yeah.
know that anxiousness, for example, will lead to a change in our digestion digestive system because it's kind of shutting down because we're trying to prioritize the blood flow to the legs and the arms, ready to run away or fight against this danger. So then they probably do feel, anxious and nervous and feel sick. So yeah, the tummy pains are probably real.
And I'm guessing with a younger child, again, that those symptoms are more apparent rather than you having to ask that question. There's probably more tears and more kind of, lashing out.
Yes, absolutely. And so with a younger child, you mightn't even use a number scale because that might be kind of too difficult for them. So you might have, a kind of a picture scale for them. So, you might have a kind of a red graduating all the way down to green, and maybe have just 3 or 4 steps on it. And so if they're up at red, we do something, if they're down at green or they're in amber, we can probably push on. But I think the key thing with younger children is that for want of a better word, the kind of cognitive behavioral approach we might take with an older child or a teenager is unlikely to work. So we have to really focus on our capacity to co-regulate with them. So that's when with a younger child, if they're feeling anxious about something, you probably will just pick them up, cuddle them, let them, notice that your heart rate is nice and steady and calm and allow that then to soothe them. And then you can maybe talk a little bit more reassuringly about the situation, offer some kind of hope that things might be easier, or that there are strategies, there are things we can do, or we could maybe adjust. Let's see if we can problem solve it so that it's not quite such a big problem that you see it is. But the key thing is the co-regulation with younger children.
Yeah, and a lot more, we've talked on here before about body-based regulation, kind of that physical holding either yourself or holding them, that big deep breath, kind of doing something quite physical to get them back in their body.
Yeah, 100%. And we know, with any kind of age of child or teenager, all those kind of physical grounding exercises, so noticing, one of the ones that you might do if a child feels like they're kind of spiraling in terms of their thinking and they're just becoming more and more anxious is, give them an ice cube and ask them to hold the ice cube in their hand. And so get them to notice it. So it's very much about the mindfulness, but it's also about just noticing the physical sensation, but just kind of drawing your attention away from the worry thoughts and down into, oh, this is cold, but now it's starting to burn. Why is it's ice? It's burning my hand. And oh, now I can feel the water dribbling through my fingers. And so just that kind of awareness, bringing yourself down in a grounding way, just kind of just brings some of the intensity down. And then maybe again, that frees up their brain because to I think a little bit more rationally about the situation, because our brains definitely get completely fired up. We've got the very strong kind of instinctive drive from the brain stem, the amygdala in the brain stem, which is giving out all these kind of klaxon warning symbols that, this is dangerous. It's the one that's starting the flow of adrenaline. And we have to somehow regulate that and manage that with grounding or with relaxation exercises so that it just frees the brain up then to become more rational. Because the upstairs, the kind of the main part of your kind of thinking brain. I'm so used to calling it the upstairs brain, thanks to Dan Siegel, but your neocortex. Dear God, I couldn't even think of the actual jargony term there. But your neocortex can't function if it's getting a really powerful brainstem signal that there's danger about. So we have to try to regulate that first.
Like a tipping point. I can imagine kind of once you've gone kind of over that hill, that you're in that. And you can't actually do much about it. You need someone else to kind of bring you back.
Yeah. Yeah. Or in an ideal world, when you've done that enough times with your child, or certainly with your teenager, they'll learn the skills for themselves. And so they'll have the strategy that just before it reaches that kind of tipping point into the spiral, that they catch it and grab it and hold on to it and regulate it themselves, turn that kind of temperature dial down on their oven.
I'm assuming like it's one thing to talk about perhaps encouraging your child to perhaps go to GA or something like that that's making them anxious. It's a whole nother level when we're talking about something like school, something that they are supposed to do on a daily basis. Can you talk us through a little bit about that, kind of trying to encourage them to go to school?
So I think the school-related anxiety is harder, because school is one of those things that, really we don't want kids to avoid, and it's not healthy or helpful for them to avoid it. And so that requires not just you, not just your child, but also the school and whatever other supports are available. So you've got to be going in, talking with the teachers to see, particularly if you're aware that there are certain kind of flashpoints that raise your child's anxiety. So say, for example, with younger children in primary school, I know of one situation where the big worry for the child was using the school toilet, the bathroom at the back of the class, and the fear that he might wet himself because he didn't want to use the toilet was the thing that meant that he couldn't go into school. And so
Okay.
so that then meant, talking with the school, and so he was allowed to use the wheelchair accessible toilet out in the corridor, and he was fine with that.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, that solved the problem. And so sometimes, it's a question of problem solving with all the people involved, and there might be things that you can adapt or shift or change for a child. And I think that's particularly important for children with neurodivergencies, because the anxiousness that they feel, again, it's usually very rational. It's, but at the same time, it's overwhelming for them. And it is about, though, can we change some of the circumstances, some of the environment to make it easier for them, rather than expecting them to be the ones that are adapting all the time. That said, then, it may be the case that you've done all the adaptation, you've sometimes shortened a school day. If you've a child in secondary school, it might be that there's a particular class they just don't go into because of whatever relationship with the teacher or whatever it might be that was causing the problem. And then it's still, though, about, going through all these steps of, having a strategy to feel like you can calm the physical side, having your positive self-talk ready, having a sense for children as well. One of the things I talk about in the book is letting how you can let children and teenagers know that they actually are in charge of their thinking, because many children will say to you something like, well, I can't help it. This is just it. The thoughts just come. I don't have any control, and in fact, we do. And so there's an exercise that I've explained in the book where we get children to imagine three different scenarios, and so the first one they're imagining is a pink elephant. So they're creating an image of a pink elephant. Then I ask them not to think about the pink elephant, but to imagine something else. And so they're trying to create this other image, while I'm actively reminding them not to think about a pink elephant. And sure enough, when I check in with them, then we find that most children had intrusive thoughts of pink elephants because I kept mentioning them. And then after we've talked about that, then I asked them to imagine a golden dragon. And so they conjure up an image of a golden dragon. And what that exercise does for them is it allows them to see that, A, they could absolutely direct their thoughts where they wanted. They were able to imagine the pink elephant when I asked them to do that. They were able to imagine the other thing, albeit harder because I kept interrupting them. And then they were able to imagine the golden dragon. And then I can talk about the analogous nature of that exercise and say, look, if the pink elephants represent the worry thoughts, the anxious thoughts, and the golden dragon represents the positive thoughts, the thoughts about coping, then the best way to not have the anxious thoughts, as you discovered, was to solely focus on the golden dragon or the positive thoughts. And so that exercise, I mean, I've used it so many times with so many different children and teenagers, is really powerful to give them a sense that, oh, actually, yes, I can, and they realize that they're not a slave to their thinking, that they can actually redirect it and find these kind of, little golden dragons around. And so that can become your even catchphrase. It's like, okay, it sounds like we're all in pink elephants right now. Let's see if we can find a few golden dragons here.
Yeah.
So it's a shortcut for a child, but it helps them kind of get back in the zone of, okay, maybe I can cope. And so, so coming back to the school situation, children need that. They need that strategy. And then again, we're trying to find, is there a way that we can get them down from that 8, 9, or 10 on the morning, down to a 5, 6, or 7, and hopefully have a teacher or an SNA or somebody from within the school available to meet your child, take them off you, much as we would with a child who's got separation anxiety age 3,
Yeah.
and just kind of get them into that school environment and help them to cope and be a little bit of an emotional support for them so that you can withdraw. Then they're in the school, and hopefully then you're finding that they're kind of building some kind of hopefully positive experiences, something that goes well for them that they can build on.
Yeah, it sounds like almost like a two-pronged attack, because it's not enough just to remove the flashpoints. I know for a lot of kids it is going in the door when all the kids are noisy, and it's, so maybe they are having a later start or finishing slightly earlier. which is great, and that's helping them, but you're also trying to encourage them to do the stuff that's inside their head, which all I can think of is pink elephants right now.
Yeah, I know.
But it's really powerful, and I think kids of any age actually really love that kind of gamey, do you know, something
Yeah.
fun. Like, this doesn't have to be a serious conversation all the time.
No, and all the stuff is like even the the breathing exercises, they can be made into fun, and because younger children, it's very hard for them to do breathing exercises, and so they need to think about kind of blowing up a balloon and then gently letting the balloon deflate or whatever it is. So they need something extra to kind of make it more tangible for them. Older kids maybe could just get straight into like, here's a strategy, here's an approach to breathing. But yeah, I think the one thing I think that children benefit from, and that I find, when I'm working with them in my own clinic. Now, I rarely work with younger children anymore, but certainly with teenagers, even just to know that the anxiousness that they're feeling makes really good sense, that it's quite normal, and that it's appropriate even for the circumstances, is, for many of them quite startling. And they're like, oh, okay, I thought I had a big problem. I mean, I do have a small problem still because I can't do this or I don't want to do that. But realizing that there's stuff that they can do, that they actually have some power, that they have some agency in it, is really, I think, important. And so sometimes, even with the breathing exercise, like, and maybe I shouldn't be admitting this, but I often use it a little bit like a placebo effect. And so I'll often, when I was working with younger children, particularly, I'd get them to run up where I live and where I work from. I work from home. There's a very small, gentle slope, a hill, just outside leading up to the main road. And so I'd get the kids to run up the hill and back down. And so their heart rate would be elevated. And we get them to do the breathing exercise. And I'd show them at the end of the breathing exercise that their heart rate has come down from 130, which we measured after they kind of came down from the run, down to 100. And I said, you've just done that now. So if you can do that now, you can do that anytime. Anytime your heart rate is up, you can bring it down. This is something you have done. I haven't done anything. You've done this. And so it's that kind of self-belief that you give children sometimes is as important. And so that's why it's critical for us as parents or adults involved in working with kids, that we do instill that confidence, that we have belief in our kids, and we firmly kind of show them that we have faith, that they can manage this. We've got their back for sure, but they don't need us even to have their back. They've got this themselves. And so that, I think, is really helpful for kids as well.
It's like anything. I'm thinking of my 12-year-old son who took up guitar in September. And, we spent the first few weeks with him going, I can't do it. I just can't do it, and encouraging him that if he, just kept trying. And when he had a song that he wanted to kind of, find the riff for, that actually he could do it. And that sense of achievement was huge for him and meant that he kept going then.
Yeah. I mean, positivity breeds positivity. We know, I mean, it's one of the cornerstones of, kind of behavioral modification, that when you feel some element of success or you're getting some kind of positive reinforcement, you're more likely to want to do it again. So if you feel good from what you've achieved, well, then you're more likely to do it again. And I do a lot of work over the summers. I run an adventure therapy camp with another woman, and so we take kids away for a week, and so they're off doing all sorts of stuff, from abseiling and rock climbing through to bodyboarding and jumping in off cliffs into the sea and all that kind of stuff. And so when you have a child who stood on the edge of that cliff, literally stood on the edge of the cliff and gone, oh, I can't do it, and then they jump and they feel the exhilaration and the rush as they fall, and then they pop their head up and they realize that they're safe and alive. It's fantastic. And so then, you find that by the end of the week, they're the ones who are just first in. If we weren't looking out for the dangers, they certainly aren't. So, once we know it's safe, we can just let them off, and off they go, and they're leaping and squealing and laughing. And so, yeah, I mean, any opportunity for success is going to help your child then to feel like it's possible to achieve that again in the future.
Without wanting to sound like I'm apportioning blame, because I'm absolutely not, but in your clinical experience, do you find a lot of very anxious children have anxious parents?
I do, you're 100% right. It's not about apportioning blame, but there is nature and there is nurture, and so the nurture is critically important, and so the messages that we transmit to our kids are equally important all through their lives. And so I do think there are situations where parents themselves feel overwhelmed, where parents themselves are unsure about how to deal with the situation, where their anxiety rises, and it's absolutely the case that that's going to intensify a child's anxiety when it comes to it. And so even in the book, one of the things that I've covered is that element of self-care. How can we as parents regulate ourselves first before we try and help our child do it? That old kind of reference to the airplanes and putting on your own oxygen mask before you try and attend to your child's oxygen mask is so applicable to so many situations in parenting. And it's definitely the case that, parents' anxiety is going to exacerbate their child's anxiety. And so we have to understand that and find our own strategies. I mean, all the strategies that I've suggested for helping children and teenagers work for adults as well. It's just about knowing that we have to apply them to ourselves or having somebody else who can co-regulate with us. And that's one of sometimes the benefits of having a second parent in the house. If you're in that position where you're in your relationship and it's holding firm and you're surviving together with your parenting, you often find that the parents will tag each other in. One parent will be starting to spiral, not necessarily about anxiety, but even just about frustration, and the other parent comes in and says, okay, look, that's fine. Just, we'll sort this out later. Just, maybe go get a cup of tea now and I'll finish getting them ready, and it's like, and they storm off, but it's great then because you do have a chance to calm down. And of course, when we calm down and we don't have all the same kind of powerful brainstem signals that are coming, whether it's frustration or anxiety, our rational brain kicks in and we go, oh, okay. I kind of forgot that the core thing was just to get his shoes on. It wasn't about whether he was going to do it the first time I said it or how he was going to do it or that he needed to have his pink coat on before he put on his shoes or whatever, But those are the kinds of situations that for sure, our own emotional state is hugely important for the tone or the emotional state that our kids will follow.
Yeah, I've seen it. So I primarily work with preschool children, and I've seen it sometimes. We do these kind of little summer camps as well, but they're just 2 days and a few hours each day. So it's almost like practice for school or practice for summer camps. And sometimes I've seen the parents say, oh, he's really anxious and, he's not going to like it when I leave. And he's saying this all in front of the child, I'm going to be just outside the door. I'm going to stay for the hour. And you almost want to reach out and say, it's fine, we've got them. And, we'll make sure that he's okay and we'll let you know if he's not okay.
Yeah. And it is so important. And so, I mean, you're probably better off actually saying that to the parent because, what parents need sometimes is the understanding that, as you say, whatever competent adult they're leaving their child with does in fact have it. So those same summer camps that we run, obviously not the same as your ones, but the ones that I had referenced earlier, we take away sixth class children in preparation for that transition to secondary school. And so understandably, for lots of those, it's their very first time being away from home. And so there are lots of naturally, highly anxious parents about how will their child cope. And so I know, because I talked to all the parents before as part of the kind of the preparation, that, them hearing from me that we totally get it, that, homesickness is a real thing, that we're going to be there, that we have no problem if their child, is struggling to go to sleep, that me and Sinead, we're up late, they can come and they can, bring their duvet and they can lie on the sofa and chat away to us while we're doing our bits and pieces, and that they're going to be fine and we're going to manage it, and that their child will be okay. It's very reassuring. And so sometimes, parents need that too, no more than we're saying, a child might need to know that they're going to be met by the SNA, that they're not going to have to walk a particular corridor because it's, mad busy, that they can, start off in, a sensory room, for example, and just ease their transition to school. That's really nice. And so children knowing that means that they might feel more able for it. And it's the same for parents for sure. And so, we have to trust that other people also have that expertise and that ability to soothe our child. And so, that's the thing I think for some parents, they maybe don't even realize that they're just not soothing their child, that they're actually increasing their child's level of anxiety. And so when we can get back into that zone of like, oh, I could co-regulate here, but in order to co-regulate, I have to be regulated. So if I can
Yeah,
sort out
yeah.
my own regulation, maybe I can help my child regulate as well.
Do you think since COVID we have all become a little bit more anxious?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think definitely during COVID there was, enormous levels of anxiety that were again highly appropriate and very, rational given the circumstances, because there were a lot of people who were very sick and dying, and a lot of really difficult circumstances that
Mm.
people found themselves in with loneliness and so on. Um, but I think I would ascribe it probably more to the changes in the internet and social media and kids' access to that in terms of just the rise in anxiousness that's there. I don't think it was just COVID related. I mean, I think COVID put a very sharp focus on anxiousness, but I think it's all the stuff on social media now. Kids' heads are wrecked.
Mm.
I'm very glad. Like I'm in a very fortunate position that my own kids have moved out even of their teenage years, and so I'm kind of thinking, okay, we've just about got away with it in terms of the impact on particularly kind of that kind of 8 to 12 or 13-year age group are so significantly influenced by the internet and social media, and yeah, it's terrible for like it's
It's
really hard.
it's very hard because I've a 14-year-old daughter who does have a phone. I have an app on my phone called Kids Locks. That means I control how much internet access she has, how much social media access she has, what apps are allowed, what apps aren't, how much time she can have per day. And it also has like things like nudity scanners and website blocks on it. So I feel kind of reassured with that.
Hmm.
And anything outside of what she's allowed, we negotiate, and sometimes she gets it and sometimes she doesn't. So that's fine.
Yeah.
I have a 12-year-old son who's just about to go into senior school in September, and all the conversation is at the moment, why can't I have a phone? Please, can I have a
Hmm.
phone? Everyone's got a phone. I'm the only boy without a phone. It's so hard. It's
Yeah.
so hard. And I'm at that flux at the moment of going, I really don't want him to have one yet, but we're transitioning into secondary school, and I feel like everyone does have one, and is he being left out socially? Do you want to, I know that's not what we're supposed to be talking about, but I think it would be helpful for parents.
Yeah, I've got no problem moving off the topic of anxiousness. Yeah, I think it's I mean it is the reason why, when the Australian government decided to ban social media for under 16s, I was an early champion of it. I mean, I'd been talking for years about the need to regulate the kids' access, and
Yep.
and there is a huge benefit for parents in there being some kind of social and cultural, um, you know, um, what's the word, block, for
Yeah.
kids. And so I think, I mean, I would move further away. I was writing over the new year about, my real desire, which is that we don't even let kids have access to a mobile phone, a smartphone, until they're 16, because I just think that would be really supportive for parents, because that
Yep.
takes away your dilemma about knowing that it's not going to be healthy for them. But then, you're balancing that kind of negative against the negative of being socially excluded, which is the reality that he probably will be socially excluded without a phone.
Yep.
And so, when you've got those, the lesser of two evils, which actually is going to be the lesser of two evils. And so it'd be better if all kids had no access to a mobile phone, and then your child, if none of them have access, then none of them are left out.
Yep.
And I think, you know, I hear sometimes the counter argument from people saying, well, but then they're going to be absolutely, kind of mind blasted at age 16 when they get access. And I'm thinking, well, at the moment we're mind blasting them aged 8 and 9.
Yeah.
And so whatever hope they have of having some, kind of developmental maturity and readiness to cope with the social media algorithms and just the addictive nature of a smartphone, they have none. No strategy, no skills, no defenses against it at age 8, 9, or 10, or even 13. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer that we should be absolutely banning mobile phone ownership for kids, that they just shouldn't have access to it. But that's going to require a huge cultural shift,
Mm.
because parents themselves are so dependent and reliant on their smartphones, and we know that, you know, most parents now of preschoolers and toddlers will give their child a smartphone for the 10 or 15 minutes grace that they need to be able to go to the bathroom in peace or to be able to put on the load of washing,
Yeah.
because
The
digital
babysitting.
babysitting is
Yeah.
a real thing, and it's very effective, but we're just creating this cross for our own back for later in life. And yeah, so I think there's a huge shift that we need to make, and but the first stage I think is that people really come to grips with the true dangers that are out there, from everything from the sextortion probability to the addictive nature to other inappropriate content that's just going to blow your kids' minds, and leave them whatever with all these kind of negative stereotypes about women or men or whatever way it's happening. It's all out there, and it's all being fed to kids, and we have no way really. I mean, I understand what you're doing with regard to the kind of restrictions that you can put on a phone, but even with that,
Yeah.
your daughter is probably exposed not through her own phone but through her friend's phone. And so,
Exactly that.
you know
Yeah.
I mean, when our kids were growing up, we tried to do without a TV. Now, we never actually did fully without a TV in the house, but we restricted the use of it to the weekends, and we tried to restrict the use of it to watching DVDs, or actually it was VHS right at the start back in the day. But we knew full well that when they went on play dates to other kids' houses or sleepovers, we had no control over what they were exposed to, and that's the reality. And so you can only do what you can do within your own home. And so when you have a child coming back going like, oh my God, like it's so unfair, I mean, they're allowed to watch anything. They actually watch real TV. They don't even watch DVDs. They watch real TV. Did you know there's a show, blah, 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 blah. And you go, yeah, I do. I get that. And I understand it. And I think it's hard for you.
Yeah.
And yet these are the rules in our house, and every house has got different rules. And so, it's great that you get to experience somebody else's rules for a short period of time. But when you're in our house, unfortunately, you're going to have to suck it up and live by the rules that are here in our house. And so it's that kind of approach, I think, that, allows kids to have their opportunity to moan and to bitch about the fact that you're just strict, you're just mean,
Yeah.
and you're not trying to deny it because you are being stricter than other parents, perhaps. But ultimately that that's in your kid's best interest. And so that's why you're doing it. And I think as long as we have that at the background, that we're being firm in certain situations, but we're doing it with a core kindness. I mean, that's what parenting is ultimately all about, being kind and firm, and if you can be firm and kind, then your kids are going to do okay. It's when we're overly firm without the kindness, or we're overly kind without the firmness, that we have problems.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it makes us question our own phone use too, for a lot of households. And I know we've often had that conversation with our 14-year-old, but you're on your phone. Yeah, I'm on my phone now because I have worked all day and now I'm looking at this, but also I have a fully fledged adult brain. And, I didn't have any of this stuff as my brain was developing. And I will give myself a limit now. And I've noticed myself, if I'm constantly on Instagram, I don't feel great at the end of it, for whatever reason that is. Is it comparison? Is it the doom and gloom of the world right now? But, if I'm limiting my own,
I think it's our strong sense that we're just not spending our time wisely as well.
Yeah,
And
yes.
I remember, so I do Instagram and put up reels, answering parents' questions on Instagram. And for years I did nothing on Instagram. I mean, I had, maybe just by pure default, a couple of thousand of people that were following me. But I never posted anything because, but I have an agent who looks after a lot of my media type stuff. And my agent was kind of saying, it's all about the socials, David. You got to up your numbers in the socials, because, when you've got these campaigns, you got to do this, and I was like, okay, but I don't think anybody wants to see me eating my breakfast or, the view from the walk that I did. I don't think that's what people are interested in. And so anyway, my manager eventually said to me, she said, look, she said, I followed this woman. Now, she's a pediatrician. The Strep A that was out. And so Strep A was whatever, two years ago, there was a big thing about Strep A. And she was like, she put up a little reel on that now. And it was really good. Like I felt very reassured. You could do that now. And so I thought, oh yeah, maybe I could. So anyway, I knew nothing really about Instagram because I hadn't used it. So I had to go to my son, who was 18 at the time, doing his leaving cert. And I said to him, look, I've got to do Instagram. Apparently, I've got to create these reels and upload them, and I don't know how to do that. Can you teach me? So he was
Already
like,
sounding ancient.
I know. Well, I'm actually, getting older now, but yeah, I definitely sounded my age then. And so my son said, he said, oh, Instagram. He said, oh, he said, that's. That's properly addictive now, Dad. Like that's, that he said, I've actually taken Instagram off my phone because
Wow.
I can't study. And I was like, wow, okay, I've done something right as a parent. If my son
Yeah.
can voluntarily take Instagram off without even being told. But I said, well, look, I still need to do it. And he said, okay. So he showed me how to do it, and he showed me about how to upload reels and adding the captions and all the bits. And but his final admonition to me was, he said, Dad, like I said, these reels, they're like properly addictive. He said, you've got to be careful you don't get high in your own supply here.
I
So
love it.
I know the words
Unreal.
of wisdom.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so at the start, though, I found that I was pretty good. I'd upload a reel, I'd come back maybe a day later or later on that day just to check the insights on it, to see how it was performing, as you do, to see whether anybody, get that kind of social media validation that somebody,
Yep.
cared enough to look at it and whatever, and to watch people, starting to follow, and I was pretty good at that. I'd say for the first 3 or 4 months, that's all I did. So I started in February, and then the summer came, and I was a little bit less busy because I take some time off after I run those adventure therapy camps, and so I started to look at the reels that were, being fed to me, and oh my God, a year and a half later, I'm as bad as everybody else. And this is me with all of the knowledge that I have, with all of the,
There you
in,
go.
in theory, the expertise to know that this is bad for me, and yet it's so powerful. And so that's the way the AI works. That's the way the algorithms push us, and it's designed to be addictive,
Yeah.
and that's the problem. And so here we are as adults struggling to regulate our own phone use, and yet we somehow expect kids are going to be able to do it. And if we can't do it, how are they going to do it?
And that's why I guess we are looking to those tech companies to take some responsibility for the addictive nature of their algorithms, that this is what we need to be
But
holding them accountable for.
But if you think back to and I know people draw the analogy to the cigarette companies back in the day, nobody was saying to the cigarette companies, just take out the nicotine, just take out all the, the addictive elements of the smoking,
Yeah.
and then it'll be all right. No, people were saying, look, just don't let kids smoke. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
make it illegal for kids to have access to
So
cigarettes until
true.
they're old enough to make a choice. And so I think that's where we've got to go. You cannot expect a company that's looking to make billions of dollars to say, well, let's take out the very ingredient that's going to cause us to lose billions of dollars. What's the
Yeah.
point for them? So it's not about the tech companies. It's about regulation, and it's about governments, and it's about, people saying this is just not okay. You are a private enterprise, and we are not going to let your private enterprise disturb and disrupt the social good that we need. And so that's, I think, where the push needs to come.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I do think it will be once we actually realise how damaging it is, like the tobacco companies, that,
Yeah.
it's only once we start seeing cancer everywhere or whatever the mental health fallout will be.
Yeah, but I heard, I was a report I heard the other day that, in America, there are people suing the big tech companies for their children's addiction. And so, I mean,
Mm.
once that starts to hit the bottom line for the companies, they might change.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to do it. I mean, if we had a class action, where you have 100 million children and teenagers who've been negatively affected by
Yeah.
the algorithms, suing TikTok and suing Instagram and suing whoever, well, then maybe something might shift and change from the tech side. But until then, the tech side is not, they're not going to be motivated to change. So the push, the restriction has to come from elsewhere. So yeah.
And meanwhile, it's back to us parents and the battle. And I can see already that although we might let him have a phone, it's the other stuff that comes with it that probably won't be allowed for a while, you know?
Yeah. For example, yeah, maybe, don't let him have Snapchat,
Oh,
even though that is the one that most of his friends will be on, and that's the one that he will probably most covet.
yeah,
But there's a benefit as well to waiting and to not getting what you want when you want it, and we know that with kids, for the capacity of delaying your gratification. I mean, it's what none of us do now anymore because of phones.
yeah,
So in the past, like when we wanted to switch off or relax, we couldn't just do it instantly, whereas now most of us in any moment of non-productive activity will whip out a phone.
yeah.
If like, I mean, not to be too crass about it, but if you go into a men's toilet now, most men at the urinal have a phone in their hand while they're peeing.
Really?
And I'm like, How can
Wow.
you not even pee without looking at a phone? Like where have we come to as a society that either you need this distraction to free your body to just let go and do the pee, or that somehow that this is like a useful kind of use of your time when you could just be peeing and then going washing your
Of
hands, you
all
know?
the things you've said today, this is the one that's blown my mind. I
Well,
just cannot. Well, okay.
yeah, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, like most kids who have a phone will take their phone into the bathroom, and that's not necessarily about the weeing bit, but that's about the privacy that it
Mm,
engenders for them, because there are a few places in the home where parents are unlikely to barge in. The bathroom is one of them, and so that again is another thing for parents when we're thinking about children and their mobile phones, is to think about having access to their mobile phone only in the public areas of the house, because again, it just reduces the temptation to get into those sticky situations where they're looking at porn, or where they're whatever it is that they're doing that you really don't want them to be doing at the age they're at. So yeah, so I think we've got to say really firmly, no phones in bedrooms, no phone ever going to the bathroom with
yeah.
you, simply to minimize risk.
And I would say, just from my own experience of my daughter's friends, do be careful about what apps you are using for kind of trying to restrict, because some of them are very easily, uh, you know,
Overridden.
yes. And, the fact that I can see some kids that so say have an hour's screen time allowance and then they're on it the entire evening and nobody's going, hang on a second, how are you on that still? Do you know what I mean?
Kids are enormously resourceful. I,
Yes.
I mean, I obviously work with lots of teenagers, and so I'm working and chatting with lots of their parents, and so I hear about the battles parents are having with their kids with regard to mobile phone use, and I know of at least two confirmed cases where a parent has actually taken the mobile phone, kind of proper nuclear stuff, said, you're not having this now for the next 4 weeks because of ABC behaviors. And then, initially there's a huge protest and lots of disgruntlement. And then, there's this kind of real purple patch, and they're going, oh my God, look, they're back to themselves, and whatever. But actually, in those two situations, the child had just gone down to the local CEX equivalent store, bought a secondhand mobile phone for nothing, for dirt cheap, and they're back on their Snapchat. And so they're getting their daily
Fix.
injection
Yeah.
of Snapchat, and so they're able to again regulate. And so I think that's the other bit. Like, and I'm not a huge expert in the whole kind of brain bit, but I'm picking up more and more about just the impact of dopamine and serotonin, and how that's generated by mobile phones. And so, of course, when kids don't have access to that, they are going to be dysregulated. They are going to feel antsy. It's like if you are a heroin user and you don't have access to your heroin, you're all over the place. Kids are going to be exactly the same when they don't have this ready access to the very thing that was acting as a kind of I don't know, a blunting, or just kind of giving them these little kind of shots of neuro endorphins and whatever else
And
they
I
are.
and I guess that's going all the way back to what we started talking about, which is the anxiety. So I can imagine that feeds into it too, the anxiety of either not keeping up with your friends, or having that phone removed, or the direct comparison. All of that is
Yeah.
feeding back into that.
Yeah, 100%. And it is all of those things. And it's, the messages that they're getting about, eating disorders, and what was the thing? It was something maxing, looks maxing, now is a new craze, particularly for boys, which is all about how you can maximize your attractiveness to girls. And so that's everything from sculpting your body through training, to your skin preparation, to your whatever, mad stuff,
Wow.
right down to the breaking of bones in order to get a better bone structure.
Stop.
Bone maxing, it's called.
Oh my
So,
God.
and so, like, I pick up on these terms and I'm like, I've never heard that before. No more than you're now going, I've never heard that before. And so now you'll go look it up and you'll discover it's a thing, and that it's a thing on the internet, and it's a thing that your child has probably come across long before you will have. And that's the other bit that really bothers me, is that we always feel like we're on the back foot.
Yeah.
Like I have never felt like I'm ahead of the curve when it comes to, kids and technology, and because the technology is always, always, always pushing, which means that the messaging that they're getting and the trends in that messaging are constantly shifting and changing, and we're only ever, kind of coming in second place. And for some kids, of course, that's too late, because the thing has happened. They've gone and they've broken their leg because they needed their legs to be shorter, longer, whatever.
Yeah, and I think that the apps that they are using and the social media they're using is different to us. The TikTok, the Snapchat, they're using it in such a different way that we're nowhere near the loop that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, most of us, will complain about the interminable WhatsApp
Yeah,
groups that we're
yeah,
part of, and oh, I've got to mute that group. Oh my God, they just keep talking,
yeah,
and so that's us. But then we're also drawn for just the same thing. We'll be drawn in, and we'll flick on our phone, and it is interesting if you look at the stats on your insights on your phone for your phone use, which you can access, what's your first, when you pick up your phone first, it'll tell you what app you go to first,
yeah,
which is interesting.
yeah,
And so suddenly you realize that, okay, I'm always drawn to Instagram. Okay, well, that's my low hanging fruit. If I want to change my behavior, even if I just do something different on my phone first. And so by waiting 10 minutes, the urge to check my Instagram might actually go away.
yeah. I actually have an app on my own phone, and it's called One Sec. And because Instagram is my go-to, and like you, I started for work and then it just slipped. And I realized every time I was picking up my phone, I was just opening Instagram for no particular reason.
Yeah.
One Sec, it puts like a breath in so that the phone actually rolls through a deep breath. It literally, you feel it shake in your hand and you have to take a breath. And then you have to answer do you want to open Instagram, and why are you opening it? And it gives you like a
Oh,
list of reasons. So is it to escape? Is it to look up information? Is it to message? Are you bored? Whatever. It absolutely halved my use of Instagram.
thank you, Steph. I feel so much better now. I'm going to go and download One
Yeah.
Sec.
And it's about €15 for the year. And it's the best thing I've ever put on my phone, because it
Okay.
just suddenly caught me. And I was like, what? Yeah, why am I? Why have I just picked up my phone? And jump, I was gone.
You see, I
Wasn't doing
need
it.
I need that now, because I have to be able to prove my now 21-year-old son wrong, that I
Yeah.
didn't become addicted.
And then you can look up the stats, how many days has it saved you? How many hours has it stopped you going on Instagram? And for me, it's been a game changer.
Oh,
Um,
great.
we're coming to the end of our time. I was going to just reference, because I love it, the film Inside Out 2. And
Oh, yeah.
the character, do we like this? Do we like that explanation of anxiety? I love one of the lines where she says, I'm just trying to keep you safe.
Yeah, I mean, and that is what anxiety is all about. That's what the danger response system is trying to do, protect you from danger. Inside Out 2, I actually have never seen. I've never seen either
What?
Inside
You're
Out
the
or Inside
second
Out 2.
psychologist that I've interviewed that has never seen it. Homework, homework.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm not convinced, but yeah, I mean, I think anything that helps us understand that the processes that are happening are natural and normal, that there's a good reason for them, is going to be helpful. So if that's what the Inside Out 2 says to us about anxious feelings, that it's like, this is just makes good sense for me right now, the
Yeah,
downstairs part of the brain, then great. If kids can understand that, that's going to be helpful for them.
yeah,
But then they also need to know that, what's not happening probably is the rationalization in the the kind of the neocortex part of the brain, that's not, the rationalization is not really occurring, where they're able to find the fact that they will cope, as opposed to,
yeah.
the belief that they can't cope.
Yeah, I just love the little character, I guess, having that kind of visual representation, and the fact that she's just planning out for every scenario that might happen, and we've got everything covered, and don't worry, nobody else panic. And some of the other emotions then are just going, whoa, hang on a second, like, we don't need to plan for all of these scenarios. Yeah, I just found it useful, kind of for the younger kids anyway.
Very good. Well, I may in fact get around to watching Inside Out
Yeah,
2 at some
there you
point.
go. So the One Sec app and the
The
film.
ones, yeah.
Your
And you
book
can
is,
just think about pink elephants.
and I'll be thinking about pink elephants. Perfect. Your book is out the 5th of March, available in Eason's, I believe.
Well, it's available everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was available for pre-order prior to the 5th of March through Eason's. Well, because I was running a particular opportunity for people to come to a webinar on the 4th of March for those who had pre-ordered. But yeah, for everybody else now, it's just available. Any good bookshop should have it. It won't be just Eason. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stef.